Damn, I shouldn't have named my last movie review Pure Dumb Fun, because this movie was exactly that as well, maybe even more so. At first, I didn't understand why they made a second movie. When I first heard about it, I was like, really? This managed to get a sequel? I remember back in 2018 when I first watched the first Meg movie, I thought it was it was terrible. I don't know if I straight up hated it or not, but all I thought was yikes. Recently, I rewatched it. Okay, I rewatched the first Meg movie, and you know what? I ended up thinking, hey, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was back then, when I first watched it. It was actually some decent fun with a lot of heart as well. Maybe I didn't like it back then because I thought it was just way too dumb. But now I've come to kind of take these movies as they are, which is unrealistic, dumb fun, and just try to enjoy them for what they are. And the second Meg movie takes on the same formula as its predecessor, where Jason Statham returns as Jonas Taylor and leads a research team into the deepest parts of the ocean for an explorative dive. But the journey soon comes to a halt when, you guessed it, colossal prehistoric sharks try to hunt them down once again. No surprises there. In fact, there aren't too many surprises throughout this whole entire movie. It's exactly how you would imagine it. Very similar to the first movie, and the main selling point is Jason Statham finding a huge ass shark, or in this movie's case, multiple huge sharks. For me, it's a movie that's a perfect popcorn flick. It's one where you enjoy the absurdity of it with all your mates. Reminds me of Sharknado a bit. Some of this movie had some pretty questionable CGI and just moments of a lot of ridiculousness and action, as well as a lot of stunts. Ridiculous moments and stunts. Some guy actually left like midway through this movie at my theater, and part of me was like, maybe that guy's got a point. Maybe he's not just doing that because he has an issue at home or something like that. Because a lot of Act 2, like midway through, wasn't really much. It was actually just a whole lot of unnecessary plot at first. I mean, a part of me at that point was like, come on, get to the good part already. And when I saw Trench as the title, I instantly thought Mariana Trench, or, the deepest part of the ocean. And while in this movie it might not be the same trench, it's still a trench where they go deeper and they go exploring. And because of that, I thought, hey, maybe and hopefully there'll be much more unique sea monsters, And while it does get pretty suspenseful down there, and there were a jump scare too, there weren't many sea monsters to brag about, unfortunately. Not that there's any real problems with that. I mean, the movie is still titled Meg, right? However, a large portion of this movie, especially in the second act, there was almost no Meg. It was just pure action, combat, man-to-man, like one of Jason Statham's action movies at certain parts of this movie. Very different from the first one, I will have to say. At one point, I thought it's either they wanted to experiment a little bit too much with the movie, or they just kind of forgot about the overall goals and direction. There was so much man-to-man combat that it kind of reminded me of like Fast and Furious in a way. At least that's what I thought before the final act. Let me just say, the final act, honestly, it redeemed everything. It made all that waiting very worthwhile. As a guy who is into dumb fun, the final act was the exact definition of it. Like, honestly, I was happy. I left the theater feeling fairly satisfied. Just the hilariosity of it all, like, it just suddenly emerged out of its shell. It was all serious at first, and I thought it wasn't going to be as hilarious as the first movie, but then the final act was just a culmination of, like, what we were all after with these movies. Paige Kennedy was in this movie a lot more, it felt, as DJ, which was a blessing because they really made use of his comedic background in this one. Like, basically almost all of his scenes in the final act or towards the final act were just hilarious, absolutely hilarious. it wasn't this cringe hilarious either. I mean, I didn't really cringe that much in this movie, despite cringing a little bit in the first movie because of some of the forced jokes that I heard. Ultimately, Meg 2, I feel, does what it intends to do, and that's to provide its audiences with a damn fun time. Even though it does lose most of its heart from the first movie, it's definitely not as emotional at all, comparatively. It is more hilarious, dumb, and makes for a perfect popcorn flick. It's not realistic at all. It's a monster movie. It's not a shark movie. It's a monster movie. And this, this movie definitely shows that, like, obviously, Megs don't exist. It's all make-believe. Dinosaurs were in this one, even past the starting, like, even in the final act, which was kind of confusing, but whatever. And also, there was a huge tentacle monster. Yes, a scene from a hentai was recreated in this one. Honest to God. When I saw that, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they intended on doing something like that, but I feel like a lot of people will look into that the same way that I did. I'm going to give Meg 2 The Trench a B. This movie reminds me of a lot of other movies. Like, it's a mashup of different Jaws, Rambo in a way. What else? Basically what I'm trying to say is that it's not special. It's not that special or unique, but it still provides a bloody fun time. And it kind of surprised me, like, with the final act, because I wasn't expecting that to be as good as it was, basically. I will say though, at the start of the movie we saw a glimpse of some powerful suits, but I don't think we saw the full power or full capability of these suits throughout this whole entire movie. I think it would have been more epic if we saw, like, Jason Statham in one of these suits while fighting the Meg underwater in the final act, but oh well. But I mean, these movies, man, especially the first, I'd say mostly the first one, they just kind of feel like C to B tier movies. This one was definitely better in a lot of aspects than the first, except the emotional aspect, like I was talking about. But everything else was definitely a step up. I was actually considering rating this like a B plus in a way, like, but I mean, that's as high as I would have rated this movie, because again, these movies will always be like a C to a B tier in my books. Okay, I'm not a huge fan of something like Oppenheimer that really has nothing, is just all talking and makes you, like, constantly think and constantly pay attention, right? But I'm also not a big fan of stuff where you, like this movie, where you don't really need a brain to watch, where you can just act like, I'm just going watch a movie, you know, and oh, you know what I mean? I'm not into the extremes of both, so I like balance. Something like Maze Runner, where, I mean, it has a great story, right? A great emotion, you feel attached to this character. I know that's a very, like, bland comparison point, you know, not everyone likes Maze Runner. This is just an example, right? It's been a while, but I like that series, okay? That's why I'm making that example, but I'm just saying, any movie, right, or any series that causes you to think somewhat, has a story, right, and you feel emotionally attached to the characters, as well as has suspense, thrills, all that shit, right? That's what I love, right? And this movie, right, it basically has no story, or, like, it has some story, but obviously you don't come for the story in this movie. Like, come on, I didn't give a rat's ass about the story in these movies. What I cared about in the end, and what I will remember, is the hilariosity of it all, and that final act, which was epic, crazy, very questionable CGI, stunt mania action, just absurdity of it all. And I feel like that's the best way to describe this movie. But anyway, guys, that's it. Let me know what you think down below. Like and sub if you enjoyed. And as always, feel free to check out any of my previous videos. Until next time.